This is built to deliver a show for people building products, leading teams, or trying to get valuable work out of the door.
We've worked across product, delivery, and transformation, and we're going to be sharing tools and techniques that have worked for us in the real world.
Each episode, we plan to show you how you can apply those tools into your working practices today.
Lovely stuff. We're experts at this.
There we
Look at
go.
this.
It only took us, 7 tries beforehand? So, gents, today, quite a broad topic to start off with, and obviously we'll narrow down on it, but we're talking about a lot of the typical conversations that happen around the Agile world, and the common talking points, and just sharing our takes on it and what our perspectives are. So the first question for both of you is Agile dead? So going to kick off with you, Kieran. Is Agile dead?
Very good question, and I'm going to say no. I'm going to give a short answer, and I'll dive into it a little bit deeper later, but I'm going to say no, it's not dead. I think that phrase, Agile is dead, like, where did it come from? I think it's come from people's bad experiences of working in that way. I think as a concept, as the essence of Agile, I think it's very much alive from my experience in working in real organizations. And just to kind of clarify, when I say Agile, like, we might have different interpretations ourselves. So I'll tell you what I think it is. I think as an overarching point, I think Agile is about us collaboratively working to get better at shipping quality software frequently and improving as we go, always keeping the customer at the heart. Like, I think those are the things that relate to what Agile is for me. And I think most of the organizations that I've worked with, they have worked in that way to varying degrees, right? Some people do it a little bit better, some people a little bit worse, but in general, that's how most of the organizations I've worked with have been working. And just to recap again, I think that phrase comes from people having bad experiences in their day-to-day of Agile implementation. Or if you've just lived on LinkedIn for the last 10 years or 5 years, that's all people talk about, right? But yeah, I don't think it's dead at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it probably is down to people's, one, maybe lack of understanding of what Agile is and what Agile isn't, and also then their bad experiences of delivery generally, and then associating delivery generally with Agile. So I think to kind of reframe that question a little bit, or make a statement even, if waterfall is still alive, then as a paradox, Agile isn't dead, because if waterfall is incremental and is phased and it's one thing after another, so I don't know, sequence, analysis, design, releasing, shipping it, Agile is cyclical and it's getting value out of the door more quickly. So just to kind of round that off, if there is a place for waterfall delivery, and I think there is a place for waterfall delivery, there's also a place for something that is parallel, and that's Agile. So no, it's not dead.
What do you think?
So I also think it's not dead. I think its reputation is not at the highest point, and I think rightfully so, because a lot of the expectations around, I think certainly some Agile practitioners as well don't help the case of this, because they paint it as this is going to solve all your problems, right? And to me, it's not a problem solver. It might expose them and it might help you, but it's just by adopting a more agile mindset and way of working, it doesn't necessarily fix all your problems. I think it's very much alive and well, because regardless of, for me, it's not waterfall versus agile. It's somewhere on that spectrum, right? It's very rare. I think I've worked in one place that I would truly class as being agile, and that's in over 10 years in the game. I think everywhere else there's been elements of waterfall governance or constraints or funding or whatever it is, right? So I think there's always an element of them both, and it's how effectively can you utilize the right components of it. So I don't think it's dead. And if I think what agility is to me as well, if I take a step back from agile, waterfall, any kind of working methodology, and just think the word agile, I think of an agile athlete or an agile animal who can be moving in one direction at pace and then change direction effectively without without problems. I think that's a key thing, right? It's about responding to change. It's about that's always my starting point is, what does the word agile mean outside of work, and then within the working world. About how can we break things down to ship something that's valuable earlier, even if it's only to a small subset of the users compared to what the full thing would be. But I think we didn't hear much from you, Charon. We heard your thoughts on whether it's alive or not, but we didn't hear much on what you think agile is.
Yeah. So when you were talking through, actually, the example I already had in my head, actually, and it's really fitting that just as I'm saying this, I can see it on your T-shirt. When I see an agile animal, I think of a squirrel.
I've never heard that before.
This must be.
Never heard that before.
In my head.
A squirrel is the picture of agility.
Yeah, it is though.
I must have been
you look up
living under a
agility in the
rock.
dictionary and it's got a squirrel right there.
An agile, a squirrel is one of the most agile animals that there are. The ability it has to change direction, I don't know, navigate obstacles, climb fences, jump over things. It's crazy how agile it is. And also, just on that picture point, that must be fate, because I was saying that sentence and then I saw the picture of the squirrel and I had to just get it out there.
It must be, but the next time I go into a boardroom, the next time I'm speaking to leadership, I'm going to say we need to be more like a squirrel.
Exactly. So just to kind of expand on
I don't know if I have the
point.
heart to tell him it's a beaver. But we'll work with it.
It's a squirrel. It's a squirrel.
We'll work some magic on the editing.
All right.
But what is agility? And I think agility is being able to respond to change. It is to be able to navigate those obstacles. It is able to be able to jump through hoops, climb fences, change track. It isn't just planning something 10 years ago and then delivering it 10 years later, when needs and just general landscape of what users interact with have. Imagine trying to deliver something 10 years ago that is a mobile related service. So for example, you'll be maybe delivering something that is going to be on Blackberries, BBM stuff.
On the
And-
BB
Imagine that. And today, 10 years later, you finally got to deliver it and nobody's using it.
Yeah.
But you haven't responded to change. You haven't realized that actually there's apps in the marketplace. You haven't realized that you can come up with an idea and ship it the same day or next day. And that's the environment that you're living in. So for me, agility is responding to change, staying current, delivering short and frequently, but also planning early and delivering close to when you planned.
So that's quite an extreme example of like a 10-year time frame, and obviously to highlight the point, right? And technology is deprecated and what have you. But Kieran, to you, like, when you hear agile, the common misconceptions around it, like what is agile definitely not to you?
For me, there's
A beaver.
it's definitely not a beaver. There's a few things, right? But the only one that I want to highlight is it's not a silver bullet. Just smack the microphone there, sorry. But I think most people, and we can talk about this in a bit when we speak about how do we think, like you asked the question, is it dead? Like, where did that even come about? Who killed Agile? We'll come on to it in a little bit. But to answer your question now about what is it not, it's not a silver bullet. And I think that's the mistake that most practitioners, most leadership, most decision makers make. They see this shiny new thing, or that's what they thought, and they say, hey, actually, we've been doing waterfall or a sequential model for X amount of years. This thing over here is shiny, it's new. Let's do that. And go send everyone on a 2-day course and everyone's going to be agile. It's not a silver bullet. It will not solve every single problem. It will certainly highlight issues and challenges and obstacles, but it doesn't work for every environment. And I think that's where people earn their money.
And that's where earlier on the answer to my question was if there's a place for waterfall delivery, and I think there still is a place for waterfall delivery, agile is still alive as well. Because if you're going to assume that one thing replaces another and then something else comes along and replaces it, then you're basically saying that they can't live together and in parallel. There's not a need for, or the right time and place for waterfall delivery versus agile delivery versus some other type of delivery.
Do you know what I find so interesting about the whole waterfall versus agile debate is this chap, I forget his name, someone in the comments correct me, Winston Royce or something like that. In the 70s, he came up with this phrase when he was talking about in his paper. He said, in our software delivery, it flows in stages like a waterfall. And then people in the industry, they hooked onto that phrase as a waterfall. And that's what people were working through for X amount of years. And then Agile came about 30 years later in 2001. And that was a different approach. And people instantly said, okay, well, this is waterfall. This is how we've been doing it for X amount of years. And this is Agile. And this is what we've been doing. Now, to set some context, I'm 33 years old. I wasn't about when any of these things were invented, right? So I've come into this game
2001.
8 years ago. In the 70s when waterfall kind of blew up, or the phrase kind of was announced and blew up. And then 2001, I was 9 years old, right? So I was picking my nose, playing Pokemon cards, playing Blades, right? I was doing all sorts of things.
You weren't analysing the nuances between Agile and waterfall.
I absolutely wasn't, right? And at that, and what I'm trying to basically say
He's
is
getting ready to meet me 2 years later.
Well, yeah. Well, what I'm trying to say is I don't have the context of what was happening in those times, like around when these things were blowing up. And I don't think that initially it's waterfall versus Agile, because the guy that created waterfall, he said in the same paper, well, actually, this is one way of doing it, but this isn't the only way, because there is a need to be iterative and to respond to change and to revisit those earlier cycles. So the person that coined the term waterfall, in the same paper, in the same breath, said, actually, we need to work in this more agile way. And that's why I find this whole conversation between waterfall and agile so interesting, is because it isn't one or the other. It is, what type of work are you doing? What type of organization are you?
What works best?
What works for that scenario? So it's all centered around the problem we're trying to solve. And you might want to optimize for learning. If you're creating a new digital product and there's more unknowns than there are knowns, you might want to work in a more agile way. But if it's very deterministic and you've done this thing countless times before, then actually you might want to work in a more sequential way, because you can plan a little bit more upfront.
If we think for a minute around maybe the misconceptions around and what Agile is not. So if I kick off, I think we weren't done any favors if you either read the book or just hear the phrase things like twice the work in half the time. I think that sets an expectation that, you know, similar to your point, Kieran, that there's some kind of a silver bullet, that this is going to solve the problems, you're going to do twice the work in half the time. Is that sustainable and scalable? Maybe not. Maybe in the early days, if you're a very traditional environment, you can see those kinds of gains, but it's not sustainable. And it, you know, again, to me, Agile is not just a mechanism to continuously increase what you're delivering and the pace of what you're doing. You know, you're going to hit a point of what I consider to be optimal circumstances, whether that's your funding or your team dynamics or whatever it is. You've looked at everything that's going on and you've kind of fine-tuned it to a point. That's going to plateau, right? So to me, Agile is not just going on this upwards trend continuously with no end in sight. But what about yourselves? Like, what are some of the common misconceptions that you see that might be feeding into that narrative of Agile is dead or harming the reputation?
So a few things. So one, I said before, it's not a silver bullet. The second thing is, it's not any given framework. Like sometimes people would say, okay, if we do Scrum and if we follow the Scrum framework, we're going to be agile. And that's not the case, right? Or if you were to work in one organization and you see something working really well and you lift and shift and put it in another organization, that's not going to work. And why is that not going to work? If I was to ask you guys the question, why is it going to work? What would you say?
Why is Agile going to work?
If I was to lift a scenario, a framework, an approach that works really well in one organization and I take it to another organization, why would it not work in that organization? Or why is it likely not to work?
Because the people, processes, constraints, culture are different. So you can't just take it from one place to another, right?
Exactly. And that's exactly what I'm trying to say. So I think the misconception is that you can just lift and shift, but it can't work like that because the context and the environment is different.
Yeah, but also Agile isn't just a thing that you can lift and shift. Agile has nuances and complexities within it. So it could be the way it's working. It could be the setup. Are you using a Scrum board? Are you using a Kanban board? Or how is the work flowing from the left to the right? What columns do you have?
They're the same thing, by the way.
Sorry?
The Scrum board and the Kanban board.
Fine, whatever. But like a Scrum delivery versus more of a kind of continuous
Kanban approach.
Kanban approach. So that's what my point is Agile is a kind of more overarching framework with more nuances underneath it. So it could be about the ways of working. It could be about the board. It could be about the columns on that board. It could be about whether you move things from left to right and then back to the left, or it could be about just delivering on the commitments in the first place. It's not necessarily just you take everything from one place to another. There's a toolkit underneath it, and it's about how you adapt that toolkit as well.
But what are the principles behind Agile? So we're saying this, forget about frameworks, completely forget about frameworks. What are the underlying behaviors or principles that you want to follow to say, okay, actually we're realizing the benefit of agility? Like, what are some of the things that
So it's about
you kind of have to do?
for me, it's about responding to change. That's the main thing. It's about responding to change. It's about delivering value, and it's about delivering value in the most optimal way possible. And when I say optimal way, I mean where quality is high, where the value is realized at the right time. And the reason I say at the right time is because if it takes an extra sprint to release value, but that value is going to be at a higher quality, it's worth waiting that extra sprint rather than just saying, we could have done this a sprint ago. Yes, we could have done it a sprint ago, but we probably would have had more bugs. Maybe we would have had incidents. Maybe something would have fell over. So it's about basically responding to change, but doing it in a way where we're responsible and we're doing it responsibly, basically.
I want to ask one question.
Not two.
No, it's one question that might go into the next question. Where did we go wrong? So I like the question about misconceptions, and your opening question, is Agile dead? It stemmed from somewhere, maybe bad experiences. Where did we go wrong? Because clearly
What do you mean we?
We as people, as an industry,
Okay.
where did we go wrong with Agile? Because clearly the market and the job market, is indicative to something bad has happened. Because in the last 4 years in our role, Scrum Master, Agile Coach, it's taken a massive dip.
Yeah.
So where have we gone wrong?
So I think there's a few things really, but the main one is I think it can be really easy to get caught up in tools, techniques, different methods of doing different things that sound good, but if they don't ultimately tie to a critical outcome, whatever is relevant for that business, it might be delivering things more quickly, it might be delivering a more high quality solution, maybe more robust, whatever it is. If we get a little bit caught up in the, what's the word I'm looking for? In the
Theory?
Yeah, theory, I guess, would be an umbrella term to encapsulate it. Where we've all seen this scenario where you have an agile coach who will come in and will tell you about what the book says and show you all sorts of different exercises, and then they move on, and it doesn't really mean anything. Like the theory is maybe there, but I think there's a big gap between the theory and the practical. And you can say that about pretty much anything in life, right? Not just work situations, but I think that's probably, if I look at it, one of the key gaps is the theory says something. And then when it comes to actually applying it, I think there's a gap there. And I think there's a gap in proficient practitioners who can take the right tool, who can assess the situation in the right way, who can identify the right kind of things to implement in that place and to implement them in a sustainable way. I think if you have any of those things that are missing, then you end up with a situation where you've paid someone a lot of money to come in and they've spent a lot of time with your team and it doesn't actually change the end result of anything.
Where do you think we went wrong?
I think it's, like we said earlier on, it was something that industry generally caught on to. It was something that was a marketplace disruptor.
Yes.
So it disrupted the status quo. So everybody wanted to be involved in this new shiny thing, Agile. And not necessarily everybody needed to be involved, understand the detail, the nuances. And actually, probably a lot of people weren't directly affected, but they wanted to be involved and aware and basically aligned with this new shiny thing that was disrupting the marketplace. But without actually living and breathing it, understanding the constraints, understanding what came before, understanding why there's a place for it, but it's not the silver bullet, like you said. without actually working in that setup, it can be easy to misunderstand and misrepresent what it's supposed to be. And I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding and misrepresentation, and that has caused a lot of harm.
Yeah. Just to finish off that point, I think it might be a little bit controversial, but I think there's two groups of people that have kind of caused this. Me and you, Scrum Masters,
Yep.
Agile coaches, and leadership, the decision makers. I think the developers, the engineers, the teams themselves,
The product managers?
have always, so the developers, engineers, they have always worked in a typically agile way. They're always collaborating well. In general, there might be silos here and there, but in general, developers always communicate really well with each other. They're always building and demoing and looking for feedback. This is my experience, right? Again, I wasn't here in 2001 in the industry or in the 70s,
Poor
right?
commitment, really.
I know, I should have been there, right?
I don't think they're always looking for that. Sort of,
This is from my experience,
yeah.
though, right?
Yeah.
And I think they've naturally always worked in a typically agile way where they're looking to learn, looking to figure out, get the customer feedback. Are we working on the right thing? I think the problems come from two groups of people. I'll start off with leadership. They see this thing, this new thing. They want to work with it. They want to go send their staff off and work in the agile way without realizing what is it, what benefits is it going to bring, how are we currently working, and do we actually need it?
Yeah.
And then the second group of people is us, the Scrum Masters and Agile coaches. I blame us because I say, or I see, we go on these 2-day framework, 2-day courses, and we have a look and we say, okay, well, actually, this is what it should be. Let's go back into our companies and let's implement it without challenging leadership to say, actually, we don't need this thing because we're working in a way that is driving outcomes. It's driving value. We don't really need to work in this way. And then the flip side of that is, as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, we implement it to a T and we don't adapt to our context.
Yeah. Okay, so we tried to address some of the, I guess, common talking points in the space, right, around is it dead? You know, we've recapped on, I think, a lot of the active discussions. If we're to cap it off now, though, before we move on, how would you encapsulate your main thoughts on, I guess, everything we've talked about, and in thinking specifically around what the viewers can take away?
In one sentence.
Of no more than 5 words.
Use your context and your environment to inform how you need to work, whether that's agile, whether that's waterfall, whether that's something in between. Use your context, your environment, your people to inform that decision.
Very insightful.
That was really good. I
think that was like 20 plus words though, so you failed the assignment. No, that's
I thought the sentiment was.
I think
good
in terms
anyway.
of the succinctness, I think you hit the nail on the head. But what about yourself, Sharon?
I would say don't get drawn into a debate on whether agile or waterfall is fit for purpose for you. Think more about your ways of working and the enablers and the practices you want to apply, rather than getting drawn into a wider controversial debate that maybe isn't needed right now.
We're going to move on to ship it or scrap it now, which is a section where we try and rapid fire some quick answers. We're not allowed to sit on the fence. We'll throw some subjects out there that may be a bit controversial, but it forces us to take a side and explain our rationale as we go through. So the first question, gents, we have for ship it or scrap it is using a subject matter expert who has a lot of domain knowledge, but maybe not so much knowledge on the methodologies and the techniques, etc. Using a subject matter expert as your product owner who is going to essentially decide what direction that product goes in and what's important and what's not. So SMEs as a product owner, Kieran, what's your take on that? Are you going to ship it or scrap it?
I'm going to ship it. And I've changed I thought about this before. We spoke about this before. I'm shipping it based off of recent experience in that I'd much rather have a product owner, someone assuming that role who is well versed in the product and related services than someone who isn't and is a really good product owner just because they are able to articulate the the demands, the needs, the benefits of doing certain things. So I would definitely ship having an SME as a product owner.
Yeah, my answer has always been consistent throughout. I think an SME as a product owner is a really valuable thing as long as they can learn or be trained and therefore learn on the product ownership skill set, because that business context is really valuable, and that understanding of the business landscape is really important, and it actually is an advantage as well to having a product owner that doesn't know that subject matter. So I would ship it.
I think you hit the nail on the head for me. I'm going to scrap it, but you hit the exact relevant point for me, which is, can they learn around splitting value and around the product owner skill set? And certainly in my experience, what I've seen is that the product owner skill set is hard for a subject matter expert to wrap their head around. Harder for a subject matter expert to wrap their head around than it is for a product owner to have the relevant conversations and play their part effectively and still represent the views of that subject matter expert and other user groups. So I'm going to scrap it. Appreciate you two both shipping it, but yeah, I'm going to scrap it with a subtle nod to all the subject matter experts I've worked with who have tried their damnedest to do a good job in the product owner space.
I mean, you've been wrong before, right? So
I'm wrong all the time. All right. The next ship it or scrap it then is teams should strive to continuously deliver quicker.
Yeah, I can go. Teams should strive to continuously deliver quicker.
Ship or scrap? Ship.
Ship it. But it's not just about going quicker. It's about going quicker and making sure that it's of the right quality, making sure that there's not loose ends left behind. It's a really good goalpost to aim for, though. Deliver quicker, but don't sacrifice the things that are really important on that journey to deliver quicker.
I would scrap it for the very similar reason, but I have to make a decision, right? So I'm scrapping it because I'd rather someone, a team, a group of people deliver something that is correct and right rather than faster, right? Because
I'm not saying you go on, sorry.
No, yeah, because you can ship things that are faster but may be wrong, and that's fine. You learn quicker, right? But I'd rather them take the time that they need to make sure they're delivering the right thing, which can be harder, and maybe you can only do that through shipping early so you can course correct. But I'm still going to stick with
scrap it, fine.
Yeah,
that's the whole point of this section, right?
It's difficult, right?
We pose questions where there's not a clear answer and we're forced to take a side. So for me,
who's forcing us to take a side? By the way,
we are. We said this right.
I
from
never
the
said
start,
it.
right?
I think I did say. I think I did say we have to pick, right? Okay.
Yeah. Because what's the point of saying ship or scrap it either?
Yeah, my fault.
So for me, in terms of striving to deliver faster, I'm going to ship it for the reason of, I think we should always be looking for how we can improve, how we can optimize things. But I would draw the line at having an expectation of continuously shipping faster. I think I would scrap that because it's not realistic. And I think you can get to a point where if you're a dysfunctional team and there's lots of chaos going on, I think you can operate for a period of time where you do go like this. But I think any team's going to hit a point where they plateau.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive to look for these nuances that you can tweak and you can do things a little better. But I think having that expectation is unrealistic. So I'm going to scrap it.
Cool.
We've heard a few different perspectives there around the context of different situations and how there's no one size fits all. We're going to get into an exercise now where we run through a specific situation that represents what at least one of us has experienced in the real world. We're going to talk around the various approaches that we took and the practices that we put in place to take control of that situation. So earlier we've been discussing a few things around what Agile is, what it isn't, and some of the common problems that you might face in the space. What we've got here is an exercise based on a real life scenario that at least one of us has faced. We're going to take a little bit of time to just digest the scenario, drink it in, and see what jumps out to us as maybe certain points that we might want to learn a bit more about. Cheers, gents.
Drink it in.
And following on from understanding the scenario a bit better, we're then going to form a bit of a plan of what we would do to tackle this situation, because one of the things you may be faced with is multiple levels of dysfunction, and it's often difficult to know what you should tackle first. So we're hoping by following along with this workshop, that will help clear up some of that uncertainty for you. So as we look at this screen here, I'll take a super quick overview of what we see here. We've got the build-up of the main team that we're focusing on here. We see we've got 6 developers or software engineers. We've got a business analyst, a quality assurance engineer, and a product owner. We see there's a mysterious dotted line drawing to the mysterious team 2. We'll take a quick second to just look at the events that this team has. So this is within every 2-week period. These are the types of events that they have and the time that it's taken up. If we then scroll out for a minute and we look at the flow of work that they have, we see there's 1 item ready. There's a couple that are dependent on the other team. We've got a few things that are in development actively as we speak. And we've got an in test column that's stacking up the work by the looks of it. A ready to release column, again, stacking up a little bit. We've got a block column with nothing in, and anything that's been done within the last 2 weeks, and we see a few tickets in there. Now, a little bit of further context before we jump into it with any questions that you two have is the team is split across various time zones, but they've been working together for a few months and they're fairly well established. There has been a notable decrease in quality and morale over the past few months. There's an upcoming delivery date, and in order to hit that, it's very challenging. It's looking like the current indicators are that we're not going to hit that. But if we do make that, it gives us high spread visibility among industry events. So very desirable for the company. The current cycle is to release around once a month, but that process is quite painful and fraught with a number of issues. And finally, we see that over the last 3 months, on average, 30% of the tickets have been actively in progress for 20 days or more. So we talked earlier around incident aging. We talked about 20 days plus for 30% of the items. So if we have just, again, a quick look at the scenario we see on the board here, it's deliberately left off some context to see what types of questions these esteemed professionals around me may have to ask. So over to you, gents. Anything that is jumping out to you here as something you might want to dig in a bit deeper, or something you want to know why it's the way it is?
My question would be, from a product perspective, the reason we do this is to ship value to users. So why is there so much value that is ready to release that hasn't been released? And how long has that been in there for? Because it says 30% of work was there for over 20 days. Is that part of the 30% that's been there for over 20 days? Because if it is, we need to do something to unblock it.
So absolutely, yes. So part of the challenge on this team is they tend to release around once a month. And what that means, even if the work is complete within a couple of weeks, it's then sat there for an extra couple of weeks. There's other challenges as well in terms of sometimes the work takes longer than that to complete in the first place. But yeah, it's an astute observation.
So my first question would be, why are they only releasing once a week? And are those constraints within our control? And what can we do to speed up that time to deliver, basically?
So it's closer to once a month that this team are delivering. Yeah, no, that's fine. And part of the challenge is there's a reluctance to increase that because the process itself is quite painful. There's often challenges. It ropes in a lot of people from a lot of different areas to ensure the thing goes through smoothly. And we've seen in about 20 to 30% of the recent deployments that there's been quite a considerable issue that has occurred that's meant either a rollback or an all hands on deck hotfix.
So I've just added a post-it under that section about what do you want to know more, to say what can we do to make releases less painful, because I think that's one of the key things that we need to uncover. And if that means that we need to prioritize some work into future sprints to make, I don't know, the release pipelines more smooth, tests failing less, or whatever those kind of bottlenecks in that release painful process might be, make it less painful. we can start to, as a team, prioritize that, because it's not just about feature delivery. If there's some technical improvements that we need to make or some tech debt that we need to resolve, then we can plan that in from a product or roadmap perspective.
And there's a few things that we're hoping as a viewer you can gain from watching this. One of them is seeing how two experienced professionals will deal with this exact type of situation. You're seeing how their minds work, the types of questions they're asking, the areas that they're zooming in on. So hopefully you're familiar with the scenario by now. We can see on the screen that the questions are filling up in this "what do you want to know more about" column. Some of them are coming through live as we speak. We've got a few already pictured there. So Charon, you got a good question there. Did I answer that?
What can we do to make the release less painful? Yeah, so I'm suggesting we can prioritize some work into future sprints, but I think that's for the team to answer. So what specific work do we need to prioritize, and how do we know it's the most valuable thing to prioritize to speed up that release?
But did we also speak about why the release is painful? Is it a technical thing? Is it an engineering thing? Is it a
So
practice?
I made an assumption that it's because of some technical constraints or considerations, like tests failing, like pipelines taking too long to run, like...
So without assuming then,
Yeah.
Pat, can you tell us why is it painful? Because that seems to be the primary thing we need to have a conversation about. Why is it painful?
Sure, and it's definitely one of the things that jumps out in this scenario, right? And if you were following along and you identified the same thing, well done. In this particular situation, which again is based on what at least one of us has experienced in the real world, the particular release process here was a challenge because, number one, it was quite infrequent in the first place. So that meant it wasn't a very well-oiled machine when it came to actually releasing. We're talking around once a month. So it meant the types of teams there were several teams involved in that deployment process, and each of them were a little shaky on their position in the process, right? So it became quite often a little bit panicked when it came to a deployment that we had to get everyone on a call together. People weren't entirely sure on their responsibilities or what their team was expected to do. And there was often some pipeline issues as well in terms of actually deploying the code to where we wanted it to be. So does that answer that first bit at least?
It answers some of the problems that we might
So
have.
anything else? Let's throw it out. Let's get all your questions out there. We'll answer it as best as we can, and then we'll see where we land at the end.
So I've got a couple more then. So I just finished typing this one thing. I can't spell properly, but that's okay for now. All right. So aside from the ready to release column, we can clearly see that the in test column is stacking up. The team dynamic looks like there's one QA in a team of 9, it seems. What conversations have happened around that bottleneck? How are the team supporting that scenario?
So the quick answer is nothing has really been discussed other than it's been noted that there is a bit of a block in that column. Now, no one's coming forward to say what a possible solution could be or what as a team we could do to resolve that issue.
Have we thought about automation? Are there automated tests already?
There are no automated tests.
Okay, so that's another prioritization point then. Maybe we could prioritize some work to automate some of the tests that are blocking up that column.
Good thinking.
What about alleviating the responsibility from just the QA? So I have worked in environments where other people would pick up some of that load. It doesn't just have to be the developers in this scenario. We have a product owner and an analyst. Are these testing scenarios all automated? Are they all manual? Is there an opportunity there for other people in the team to pick up some of this work?
So yes and yes, I think. So the scenario here is that there isn't automation in the testing. All of the testing is left to the individual tester on the team. However, there is opportunity for other members on the team who, as we see, there's 6 developers and a few other people on the team. There is opportunity for other people to pick up more slack. However, that has not been explicitly discussed within the team.
When we say more slack, that suggests that maybe there's an assumption that all testing is a responsibility of the QA. Does that mean that there's no unit testing written by developers, for example, and even the unit testing is a responsibility of the QA.
The developers in this situation were doing their unit tests.
Okay.
They're making sure that their code worked in isolation, that the function they were working on worked on its own.
Okay.
When it came then to merging that with everything else, that was all within the responsibility of the quality assurance
So like
engineer.
integrated tests, for example.
Your integration, your regression, your everything else was
Yeah.
was all the responsibility of the quality assurance engineer.
Okay, so it sounds like there's an opportunity there where we can come up, Sharon, with some suggestions of how we can improve that. Going to another column, I can see the second column we have on this board is dependent on team 2. We're working in a Scrum fashion, it seems, based on the diagram. Why are we taking work into our sprints when we are dependent on other teams?
Fantastic question. And I think you've identified a bit of a smell in this scenario.
I disagree.
I was sniffing quite hard.
So,
but go on.
so I disagree because sometimes you can't get away from dependencies. And the important thing is to communicate up front that we're going to be dependent on team 2 and we're going to need some of team 2's time to work with us and pair with us in a sprint.
So that might be part of the that might be part of the reasoning, right? So what's your take on
Yeah, so to then demystify this a little bit, is this mysterious team 2 block here is a design team. The team that we see that we're mainly focusing on, where it's kind of detailed
What
the
kind of
profile
design?
of the team. Visuals, so product design, how the different pages flow together, what the visuals look like, what the design system is.
So if that was what team 2 are doing in the sprint, then what's the definition of ready? Because all of these tickets that have moved across the board have, I'm assuming here, at some point being ready. So is the definition of ready that there's enough understanding and the designers can pick it up to start some design?
Yeah, so what you'll see is not everything that this team had to focus on had a design element to it. So there was quite a bit of work that they had where they didn't have any dependency on this mysterious team 2, but anything that did is detailed in that second column dependent on team 2. Does that
But it has
answer?
been ready because on the left of that there's a column that says ready. So if it's dependent on team 2, what's the definition of ready?
Yeah, so that's a fair point, that looking at this, that column dependent on team 2 could shift over to the left.
Oh, so it's not ready.
So if we do a little shifty over here,
Oh, okay.
Wait, why are we shifting it now?
because I think that's a valid point, right? That we're saying,
But this is the scenario as is, right? As it was on the right-hand side.
Because the definition of ready, if it was just the way it was previously, it could be the definition of ready is that the designers know what the tickets are, they're resourced and they're ready for the work and they're ready to pick up a ticket and design it, and therefore it could still be the way that it was previously.
so in this scenario, this particular one is, it wasn't, in terms of dependent on team 2, that dependency wasn't removed until the full designs were provided and we knew exactly what we were working towards.
Okay, so we just made a mistake on the actual organization of the board. Okay.
Moving away from the board a little bit, I can see our cadences in terms of our meetings. I can see we've got 4 hours worth of refinement within the sprint.
So 2 1-hour sessions a week within
Yep.
a 2-week sprint. Yep.
And we also have a 3-hour sprint planning session as well. So that is 7 hours worth of refining and planning per sprint. But we can also see the bottlenecks on the board itself. What's being discussed within those refinements, within those planning sessions, that is still leading to the board looking like that?
I think that's a very astute observation, that we've got a lot of time we're investing into refinement, and a lot of the time when you see that, you'll notice that the planning session tends to become a lot more streamlined and a lot quicker when you're doing the refinement ahead of time. Now, this team haven't experienced that, so what they're doing a lot of the time in the refinement is getting very bogged down in the technical detail. And when it comes to planning, they're noticing that there's certain dependencies amongst other teams that they're identifying, and they're trying to communicate with that team during the planning session to say, we're looking at doing this in this sprint. Is that achievable for you?
Okay.
I think for me that comes back down to the definition of ready and their working practices. So, for example, and it also comes down to a planning and capacity point. Are they leaving capacity for that extra refinement to understand those dependencies, to unblock things that may have become blocked? Or are they overcommitting to the work and being really idealistic on what could be achieved, assuming that they're not going to come across any issues? Because just looking at the state of the board, my first assumption would be that they're committing to too much, and maybe they're being too optimistic on what can be delivered.
I think at this point, Sharon, let's figure out what we would do about this. So we've got enough context now around what's happening. We've spoken about the board. We've spoken about the kind of the meetings themselves.
Yeah.
What would there's a section here? What would we do about it? And let's kind of agree 2 or 3 things that we would take away. What's our plan to tackle this? Because there's a lot going on here, Pat, Sharon. There's a lot happening here. If in this situation, how would we tackle it? What's the first thing, the second thing, the third thing that we would look at?
So, is there a bit that we can write? What are the first things you would tackle?
I think find a space and do your thing.
Cool. So, like, I guess kind of this is going to be ordering of intervention, I'm going to say.
And just as you're thinking through that and starting to collate your thoughts, I think one useful technique to identify for anyone following along at home that you can use in this exact scenario is, it sounds a bit posh when you say it, but it's called the theory of constraints. And what you look at is all of the challenges that you're facing. And as we've seen in this scenario, real life scenario, but there is a lot going on. Theory of constraints suggests that you identify the weakest point in the whole process and you focus only on fixing that. So there's no point in trying to optimize something that already works quite well when you've got a major flaw in the system further down. So what Sharon and Kieran are doing right now, they're just taking a little bit of time. They're going to work through it in their own way, using their own techniques to present back a prioritized list of what they would do. And one way of doing that would be, as I say, using the theory of constraints, where you look at what is the main weak point, how could we optimize that, how can we address that, how can we bring that up to the strength of the rest of the process. Following on from that, once you've achieved that, it's like a lot of the tools that we see in the Agile workspace, you know, they have practical applications elsewhere. Theory of constraints comes from manufacturing, as do so many of our beloved tools and techniques that we use in this space. And that's about identifying, again, in that process, what is your main weak point? What would you do about it? And what does that mean for the end result?
I think to not bloat this section, we probably should just go through the posters we've already got down, because that would be a good starting point for.
So I think if I kick this off then, so Sharon, you've done a good job of adding sticky notes. The first thing for me, in terms of a kind of repeatable step that people should kind of try and take away, is make this visible. So we're coming into this team, we're observing all of this, these dysfunctions, these challenges. We don't want it to just be in our head. We want to make it visible, so it's a shared problem between leadership, between the teams, and whoever else.
So when you say make it visible, you mean make the fact that there's columns that are blocked and there's not value that's being released visible.
Make visible the challenges the team are facing, right? So obviously right now we're using a mural board. So we could use a mural board, we could use a spreadsheet, we could use an email, PowerPoint, whatever it is. Make the fact that we have challenges in this team visible. That's the first thing. The second thing is to kind of break it down and prioritize what's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck, right? So Sharon, you've put a couple of points there. What do you think is the number one thing this team need to focus on to give us the most value?
So I think, and this is why I've kind of labeled the section ordering of intervention. I know we both chipped into what that ordering is, but my number one thing, and it's number one on the board, is prioritize the board and kill the tickets that don't add enough value. So I think there was an implicit assumption that everything the team were working on is valuable, and the order that they're working on it in is the most valuable order. I think we need to be intentional about that. Prioritize the board and make sure that we're having a conversation about the relative priority of one ticket versus the other. And if we come across tickets that we don't think are valuable, or they're not the most valuable, we shouldn't do them now. We just kill them. We get rid of them, because what we're trying to do here is unblock the board.
I think that's a great point. So I've moved the ticket that I created, what gives us the biggest bang
Yeah.
for the buck, on the same line, because it's kind of the same thing, right? What is the most valuable thing we need to do? The one that I've put after that is what's the oldest item that we want to tackle first? Because normally I would say whatever's aging the most, let's get rid of that.
Yeah.
But if that thing isn't the most valuable thing, then let's
we would
not
have
do
already
it.
killed it anyway by that point because this is ordering, right?
Ties in with that point.
But it
above,
would
doesn't
tie in that with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
completely fine. All right. So let me move that one out of the way then.
No, I think that's still a valuable
You
point
sure?
though,
I
because we're
think it
making the
belongs there.
assumption that
Okay.
we've prioritized the board already and we've killed the tickets that are not valuable. So now we're looking at the things that are still valuable
Okay.
but aren't moving across the board.
So the next thing that I would look at is where could we improve our efficiency, especially with our automation or with our testing. So there's a couple of things here, right? So at the minute we have one QA on the team. Is it a stretch to ask other people within the team to help with that manual testing? Or is it a case we need to prioritize some automation so the next time we run through certain scenarios, test certain features, we've got this automated test in the background to do it? What do you think?
I agree. I think automating testing is really valuable, but I don't think it's the best way of us realizing progress right now. I think automation can really help us not come across this problem again in the future. From a kind of retrospecting perspective, how do we not come across this issue again and again quickly? We want to prioritize some automation and do automation. But if we're thinking about actually unblocking this board in this sprint, dedicating time to automation might not be the right thing to do right now, but it is something that we need to do and we need to do it quickly. So what I would actually want to do is, and you just moved it up, Kieran, unblock the items that are ready for release. So if we're talking about releasing value, how do we unblock that column and release value to users in the most efficient and effective way?
Nice. So I'm going to add a parallel comment around saying swarming around testing.
Yeah.
I can't spell, so I like to sound it out. People that work with me know that.
So I think that swarming around testing, if we zoom out for a second and focus in again on the board, what you'll see is there is a bottleneck around testing. So if we start to think for a second around practically...
So sorry to cut you off, because my point was about ready to release, right? So if there's value that's ready to release, the first thing should be about releasing that value, not thinking about swarming around testing, because that stuff that's not ready yet, we're going to actually then leave it later to release.
Thing.
That's the next thing. The actual first thing is unblocking the items that are ready to release. So what I'm going to do is move your post-it back below that unblocked items ready to release, because that is the next most important thing, but it's not the first most important thing.
But it's in parallel, right?
The work can happen in parallel, but if it couldn't happen in parallel and there's some sort of
No, but
constraint-
it's in parallel to unblock items ready for release.
No, because the columns are separate. So this is a ready to release column, and this is
No,
the
I'm
test
talking
column.
about the ordering of intervention. So where we're saying unblock items ready for...
No, because
sorry, you're right. It's separate. It's completely
Yeah,
it's a separate thing.
yeah. So
that's the
ordering,
first thing we want to do.
Yeah, because I'm thinking
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
about value to the user.
Yeah.
And there's something that's valuable that's ready to release. So let's get that out as quickly as possible.
I was
So
talking
think
about unblocking testing. Yeah.
That's all fair, and it's great points.
And
to
this
add to the
happens, right, in
conversation.
real life.
Oh yeah,
This
yeah,
happens.
yeah.
So
And
we end up
again,
having
this is
to go
based
through
on a
this.
real situation. We're not just making this up for the fun of it. So if we say unblock the items that are ready for release, and we acknowledge that those blockers may be varied and sometimes complex, sometimes simple, but we've done that. We've done what we can. If we focus just for a minute around this swarming around testing, because what we see from that board, again, is a backlog around testing now. I mean, Kieran, you started off as a quality assurance engineer. You will know
Who
better
told you
that? You will know better than most that the development and the testing skill set, what was that for again?
We need to speed up a bit.
Yeah, okay. You will know, Kieran, as a quality assurance engineer in an earlier part of your career, that the development and quality assurance aspects are quite separate. However, there is overlap. So in this specific scenario, and what I've seen in the past as well, is there's certain parts of the testing job that only a tester can do, that you need that specific mindset and you need that skill set in order to do. However, there's certain parts of the tester's job that I could do as a simpleton. So things like creating test cases, right? Things that if you have a basic understanding of the service, you don't need to know about the technical aspects of it. You can create test cases. So in this scenario, for example, where we say swarm around testing, one example could be we've got 6 developers. We've got a load of development work stacking up in that ready to test queue. Can we shift some of that responsibility to the developers to say, create the test cases.
Not just the developers though, because this is a common mistake that I see most people make. We have
just
an
manual
analyst,
testing.
we have a product
Yeah.
owner, we have a product manager, we have a scrum master. Everybody can be pitching in. I'm going to look at the camera. Everybody can be pitching in to help unblock the team.
Because
right?
you're T-shaped.
Because you're T-shaped, right? Or you want to be, or you want to strive to be able to support the team in a way. Like we can't just, as a scrum master, say, you guys are doing the stuff. It's your problem.
Yeah.
It's your thing to fix, right? We need to be able to work together. It's a team game at the end of the day. I agree with what you're saying. And I think to kind of wrap up some of what we're speaking about.
So how about to wrap up everything we're speaking
Okay, go on
about?
then. So we go for it. How would you wrap it up?
So to wrap up everything we're speaking about, we just go through the motion of this exercise, right? So we answer these questions. What do we think the weakest link is and why? What do we want to know? What would we do about it? It's really important to consider what side effects it might cause. So, for example, if the teams are less familiar with cutting and deploying releases because it's only once a month, what's the side effect of that specific process? What actions what we might want to take? And if we're constrained by time, by people, then what's the ordering? How are we going to release the most value with the least effort? Because that's the conversation typically that I think is the most important to have. So it's about value versus effort. We want to apply the least effort to deliver the most value. And clearly on the board we were looking at, if we were kind of scroll back to that, there is a lot of delivery happening, but it sounds like from the framing that the delivery isn't the most valuable things to be working on. So it's to strip it back. What is the most valuable thing? How do we apply the least effort to deliver the most valuable things?
I think that's fine. I think that's great. I think just to add on one small comment to that is we did that by making it visible.
Yeah.
We did that by making all of these challenges visible for 3 different people to talk about and to communicate. And then we prioritized what the most important thing is to do.
Yeah.
And I think if I was to tell someone listening to this what kind of steps I would follow, is it's make it visible with the group of people with the different perspectives, and then prioritize what's most important to you and your organization, your team, and then work from there.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think on that second point, a very powerful tool is if you think about, we think about roadmaps often in terms of product delivery and the direction a certain service is heading in. Roadmaps can be really powerful in terms of transformation as well. So we've seen in this scenario, there's clearly a lot going on and there's a lot that could be optimized. There's plenty of room for improvement.
Automation tests, for example.
Plenty of room for improvement, that being a prime one. It can seem overwhelming at first if you see, there's 5 or 6 different things that we could all be doing. If you put those into some kind of a roadmap, and there's infinite different templates and formats that you can use, if you visualize that in terms of this is the most important thing that we're doing, once we've knocked this off, then we're moving on to here, then we're moving on to there, and you can visualize that, to Kieran's point, a different form of visualization, but visualizing these different improvement points. That can make this whole process from going to this situation that we see here to a well-optimized, fully functioning, high-performing team, can make it a lot clearer in terms of how to get there.
Great.
Amazing. I think that's a wrap.
This was built to deliver. Like, subscribe, send a comment. Any feedback, more than welcome. Tell us if you love it, if you hate it. We're ready to hear it.